Good afternoon and greetings from Michigan. Welcome to Developing an AR and VR Strategy at Kaiser Permanente. My name is Tom Petro and I'm the Business Development Director at Innovative Learning Group. Thank you for joining us today. Our topic today is quite relevant to any organization exploring integrating augmented or virtual reality into their delivery arsenal, and we are delighted to be co-presenting today's webinar with our client who partnered with ILG in developing the strategy for Kaiser Permanente. As some context for today, let's just do a brief overview of Innovative Learning Group. Simply, we provide custom training and performance support solutions. We both consult with learning functions on things like strategy, and we design and develop custom training. What we really care about and what differentiates us is our focus on performance and helping organizations reach their business goals. For us, it's always about performance first. We're located in Troy, Michigan. We're just about 20 miles or so from the cultural center of downtown Detroit. We were founded in 2004 by our owner and CEO, Lisa Tunigas. And in fact, this year we are celebrating our 15th anniversary. We are also a certified women's business enterprise. This is a fact that's becoming more important to many organizations we work with as they look to increase diversity among their suppliers and vendors. And as you can see here, we work with a diverse group of medium and large-sized companies all over the country, some of which we also serve on a global basis. During our 15 years in business, we've worked with more than 170 clients across 35 industries, and more than half of our work is outside of Michigan. Let's take a look and learn a little bit about our valued partner, Kaiser Permanente. Kaiser is one of the nation's largest not-for-profit health plans. It was founded in 1945 and is based in Oakland, California. Kaiser serves 12.3 million members and has more than 218,000 employees. Pretty impressive. All right, with that, let's introduce our presenters for today, Matt Curtin and David Livingston. Matt is ILG's Senior Director of Technology and Visual Design. He provides leadership for ILG's programmers and graphic designers. Matt brings the latest advances in digital capability to practical application and learning, including augmented and virtual reality. And he was named a 2017 Learning Champion Thought Leader by eLearning Magazine. Good afternoon, Matt.
Hello.
And we also have David Livingston. He's the Executive Director, Health Plan and Workforce Development at Kaiser Permanente. He leads enterprise-wide shared services that train and provide sales performance support to all market-facing teams. And David also creates workforce development and employee engagement strategies. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
With that, why don't we get started, and we'll get started with you, David. Take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining this morning. First off, the most important thing is, why does Kaiser Permanente need and require an AR and VR strategy? And really, the most important thing for us is my organization and Kaiser in general, we want to be leading edge, not bleeding edge. And so it's important for us to stay current in regards to learning and ensure that we're using new and innovative technologies. Our future actually lies in the talent that we bring into the company. And as you think about it today, especially with the marketplace we're in, bringing in good talent is really important. And most importantly, most of the people we're bringing into the organization today are what I call digital natives. They understand computers, how they function and work very well, and it's part of their daily interaction. So the environment they come into should be somewhat like it is when they're not at work. So we want to use state-of-the-art technology to engage our folks and actually help us to drive better performance across the organization, especially when it comes to learning. So the learning that we deliver has to be leading edge, as well as has to provide the opportunity to drive for performance. We also believe that AR and VR technologies are going to help us do two things. Number one, help us build a strong reputation in regards to a cool, fun place to work. If I'm talking about these digital natives, that's kind of important to those folks, as well as most employees. And then the other thing is, big for me, is that we're recognized internally and externally as a thought leader in the learning and development space. So those are the reasons why we believe AR, VR, and a strategy for this is important.
All right, thanks, David. And we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about the value of an AR and VR learning strategy. So the first thing we need to talk about is what is an AR and VR learning strategy? It's not a instructional strategy or a solution for a particular initiative. It's really a subset of an overall learning strategy. And the goal of the strategy is to make methodical, macro-level decisions for the learning function. What we want to do is set guidelines for the learning team to follow at the project level, so when they're designing and developing learning solutions, they don't have to keep reinventing the wheel over and over again. The good AR/VR strategy is going to align with the learning company's business goals, and it's going to improve the employee performance, save time and money, and ensure the learning group contributes to the organization's bottom line. Here are some details on the approach we used with Kaiser Permanente on the strategy. We collaborated with the HPWD team on the strategy, and we provided facilitation, including the process and the trigger questions, and Kaiser provided the culture and the subject matter expertise on what they were trying to achieve. So initially, David and Alan and Warren, two of David's managers, flew out to our office in Detroit for a 2-day working session. And we started out with a few hours just showing them examples from our AR/VR discovery zone. These experiences helped them have a frame of reference for what's possible with AR and VR, which is a key beginning point. Then we dug in and had extensive discussions on each part of the strategy and documented the results in an actionable strategy report. So here are some practical examples of why an AR/VR strategy would be helpful. These are questions that you might get asked as you pursue AR and VR learning solutions. 1, we need some AR performance support developed by the end of the quarter. Could your team fulfill this request, or do we need to outsource? We think VR is going to be too expensive to develop custom. I think we should focus on off-the-shelf VR content. Can I send out an RFP to off-the-shelf providers? I think we should reach out to a staffing agency to find some programmers who know how to do AR. We don't have anyone who knows how to do it. Can I do a posting? I feel like if we're going to make a foothold in this space, we better purchase headsets for everyone. Is it okay if I move ahead with Oculus headsets? Can I have approval to buy Captivate licenses so we can start developing VR? So all these questions are the types of things that you would be able to answer if you had put together a strategy ahead. If not, it might be harder to answer. Now, we have an approach that we believe is best to do the strategy, starting from the vision. And if you look at the different section heads here, the question cards that I just showed were pulled from these sections, which really align with the table of contents of our AR/VR learning strategy, and also align with the work sessions that we worked through to develop the strategy. When we start with the vision, that really is going to focus the beginning of the conversation on why are we using AR and VR. And then that lets us proceed from there to the what and the how we will fulfill the vision that we have defined in the why. So for each one of these sections, what we would have done is we would have started with some thought starter questions for the stakeholders to review before we start the session. And I'm going to start out with the vision one. So for the vision section, we might ask questions like, assume the year is 2023. As you look into the future, what is your vision for how AR and VR will be used in your organization? How and when will it be used? How will it be developed? How will it be tracked and evaluated? And David, I'll turn it over to you to answer some of how you answered those questions.
Fantastic, Matt. Thank you. And so, of course, any major strategy start with what's the vision and where you want to be. And so when you think about this, Matt talked about 2023, and that's actually our goal is 2023. So by 2023, my organization should have deployed several AR and VR solutions, and they're really based on performance solutions that we would integrate into what we do here in learning and development. It would address the key requirements for the employees that we have, and basically based on the tenure of the employee within the organization. So we look at the employee life cycle from my organization. So we start with, from my organization's perspective, onboarding. That's where we start in terms of that employee life cycle. So we start there addressing the needs of those folks. We continue to support people through performance support, skill practice, and augmenting training when it's applicable. We would take advantage of the AR and VR technologies. We particularly have regions, and so we have regional offices. So our thought is to potentially build regional VR labs that support the technology, providing standalone headsets and smartphone applications that drive AR and VR solutions, potentially using online video simulations that provide immersive simulations experiences for our employees. And really what we're going to do is, and the vision is to look long-term for the evaluation data that's going to demonstrate improved performance, and of course, most importantly for us, is shorter time to proficiency. So of course, our goal in all this is to help build a stronger culture for KP that's more engaging, that focuses on a fun place to work, which is our future state, where we're cool and a fun place to work. Especially among our early career new hires, it's really a focus for us today, those folks coming into the organization new to their career within KP. Next slide, yes. In addition, some questions you might have about our vision also is how we would utilize this, some opportunities for AR and VR that we envision. So one of the things we envision specifically is, since I mentioned earlier we're regionally based, that most of the folks that work within our population never get a chance to see some of the facilities of Kaiser. So we thought one area that we could use is immersive virtual tours of KP facilities. That would help us reduce travel costs between our headquarters located here in Oakland, California, and some of our regional locations. Also, VR learning solutions would provide kind of a immersive you are there experience without having to bring learners or facilitators to a physical location. We also could do tours of our medical facilities through what we call a backstage pass, which will allow people to see Kaiser in action. Other ideas that we have are simulated person-to-person interactions, where the learners have an opportunity to practice difficult conversations. If you think about managers having those difficult conversations, this would allow managers to do this in a low-risk virtual environment using avatars. In addition, there's an opportunity for people to practice, push practice to people to allow them to learn by getting the information before they actually get to the training. It would also expand the capacity of our instructors through AR discovery learning in the classroom. And additionally, training could be reinforced through space content pushed to the learners over time. Additionally, for example, we could provide triggered learning through AR by allowing people to actually use functional information as it appears on their phones, helping them to get to know their workplace quicker, as well as pushing customer details to salespeople on their phone as they arrive to their customer locations. And lastly, when we have what are called benefit fairs, where we're actually speaking to prospective members about our offerings, really having those folks that are actually representing Kaiser having an opportunity to use their phones to pull up health plan details through their mobile devices, through their cameras. So those are some opportunities we look at and see how AR and VR could support Kaiser. Matt?
And then we'll move from there, from the vision to the audiences and the macro learning needs. And really, by keenly focusing on the needs of your audiences, that's how you're going to get the best use of AR or VR. So things we might think about include who is in the audience, what are the groups or roles, not only how many people are in the audience now, but is it going to be bigger by 2023? Where are they located and what are their general characteristics? What are the types of challenges they face? What are the most important skills and knowledge for existing members of the audience, and how will that differ for new employees? And what AR and VR learning applications might these audiences benefit from?
So let me just describe the audience and basically an overview of what the population we're looking at. We have approximately, well, we're going to speak specifically about one population within our group. So we work with new sales, account management, and also underwriting. Those are the three disciplines that I support. And so I'm going to give you an example of what the description looks like for one of those populations, and I'm going to specifically focus on new sales. So we matriculate into the organization about 500 new salespeople a year. The average age of those folks is around 35 years old, and they range in tenure from early career employees to very experienced employees. Most of those people work off-site, and they work on their own. And of course, because they're salespeople, they're normally on the go and really active. The challenges that we face with this population, of course, as you know, any salesperson, there's not enough time. They have too many things on their plate in terms of priorities. Also, the most important thing for salespeople is gaining access to information quickly, and that's a challenge for them, being able to gain access to information when they're on the road virtually. Their skill sets, of course, from a knowledge standpoint, they're very strong in selling skills, negotiation skills, of course, product knowledge, and understanding the specific regulatory issues based on their geographies. Some potential applications for this population, when you think about AR and VR, I talked earlier about the future state of virtual tours of some of our facilities. Also, the opportunity to practice customer presentations via VR simulation, virtual collaboration with their colleagues, and also gaining information about their customer through location-aware AR. So those are some opportunities for this population around new sales that we think, believe that AR would be a huge opportunity to support the learning needs of this population. Matt?
All right, let's move next to the learning delivery method. And one thing I want to point out here is that as we are trying to uncover what needs are that might be fulfilled by AR or VR, we might find some things that aren't a great match necessarily for AR or VR. For instance, there's a real learning need there, but it might be better served by classroom training or e-learning or on-the-job coaching. And what we would say immediately is if it's better served by another delivery method, then do that. Don't try to use AR or VR when it doesn't make sense. But let's talk about more about when AR and VR do make sense. So one thing to think about are the differences between AR and VR. And if you look at the different devices and headsets shown here, the two on the left and the tablet in the middle would allow you to see through the glasses or see the real world while you're looking at the tablet. And the two on the right are going to block your view from the real world. And that's going to be a good place to go away for training. So the distinction is augmented reality, you're going to add something to the real world but still be seeing the real world, and that makes it naturally good for performance support, helping you right in the course of your job. Virtual reality, block the real world, go away, do some training, get smart, and come back to the job. Where does virtual reality make sense? So it makes sense when practicing in reality is inconvenient or impossible. For healthcare, military, or law enforcement, it might be things that are dangerous or where you have heavy equipment or where it's disastrous to fail on the job. For some other industries, it might be where you want to practice something that would benefit from repetition, and there's no way in the real world to get that much chance to practice with real equipment. For airlines, it would be more expensive in some cases to do it with an equipment simulator without VR than with VR. And then for sales, which aligns with David's audience, the benefit from immersion or role play is a good place to use virtual reality. How about spots where augmented reality makes sense? So AR makes sense when workers can do their job more effectively or more efficiently with AR than with other forms of performance support. And we really think about two ends, a low end and a high end for augmented reality. So the low end augmented reality, it might be just looking through the glasses or pointing your tablet at something, it pops up additional information to help a worker know what to do, information that they otherwise wouldn't be able to see. At the higher end, augmented reality could provide standard work instructions in the field of view with in an easy-to-use form where they could just next do the instructions. But it could also bring up graphics, audio, or video. And then suppose they get to a spot where they need to do something and they don't have the information needed to do it. The really super thing here is that you can connect to a remote expert, and they would be able to look through the camera on your glasses or device and see what you're seeing and be able to give you advice about what to do. They could even take a snapshot of what you're looking at and mark it up and send it back to you and say, this is what you need to do next. Some other considerations for AR and VR. When we're thinking about whether we should use them, we also need to think about the audience size, because it's going to make a difference on how much hardware we need to provide. Where is the audience located? Are they going to need to use devices where they are or headsets where they are, or are they going to come to a central location? How critical or important the learning is, whether it can be done alone or must be done in a group synchronously. And then sometimes part of the intent of the learning is to have relationship building. So then you wouldn't want to structure something where people are doing it alone. So it might make more sense to consider doing it in person, but it also could make sense to do it in a internet-connected virtual reality with multiple participants. And then what equipment and tools are already available. Now, I mentioned it before that if we want it to be a training solution, we need to use VR, but we need to think specifically about how we're going to fulfill the VR. So if you think about the low end, it might be smartphone-based VR that would run in a Google Cardboard. In the middle, it might be an Oculus Go type headset that wouldn't be connected to a computer, so not quite as powerful in terms of what it can render, but much cheaper than the high end. And at the high end, a headset like the HTC Vive or similar that's connected to a powerful computer and a powerful graphics card. Similarly, on the augmented reality side, we have multiple levels. So we have the smartphone or a tablet that could run AR and pop up additional information. And we have a middle ground that not a lot of people are necessarily familiar with. This is called a Mira Prism headset. And it works kind of like a Google Cardboard does for VR, which is to say you pop your own smartphone in and a mirror reflects down on the glasses so that you don't have to hold the phone, and it can pop up the augmented reality information in your field of view. And then the high-end headsets, these are the ones that we think are going to revolutionize how some workers do their work in spots where they get that help from the remote expert. But the augmented reality glasses could be quite expensive relative to virtual reality because the technology is not quite as far along. So let's give some more thought to specifically how to choose the right delivery method. And by that I mean, is it AR or VR, and what type of headset? So inspectors are responsible for checking problems at an offshore oil refinery in this scenario, and people could die if they miss or miscategorize an issue. There are predefined procedures for how to check for issues, but sometimes special cases occur that require extraordinary experience level to resolve. So what I'm going to do is flip over to a spot where I've got set up for us to be able to kind of explore how we make that decision. And these are actually from cards that David and I used when we presented in person at the Reality 360 conference, and I've leveraged them for this purpose. But you could see we're looking at a phone-based VR solution. What is its purpose? So because it's VR, it's training. And then can we use it hands-free or not? Does it have an easy setup? Does it need to be tethered to a cable? Does it require dedicated space? So as I move to each card, we have information about that, as well as what is the special power, or you could think of it as the benefit of this approach, and what are its weaknesses. So when we look at that scenario, the first thing we might want to think about in our scenario is this a problem that we're going to solve by doing a training solution where people are going to go off the job and be trained and come back and be smarter? Or is this a type of solution where we're going to provide performance support while someone is doing the inspection to help make sure that they don't miss anything? So I would have you take a second and enter into the chat whether you think you would want to solve this as a performance support solution using AR or a training solution using VR. I'll give you a second just to make your decision there. Okay, I'm starting to see some coming in. And what I'll say here is that this is not necessarily one where you could solve it only one way or another. Either AR or VR could be the right solution. If you have chosen AR as your solution, the key thing to keep in mind is that you want to align it with performance support if it's AR and VR if it's training. But I would have chosen AR for this solution and tried to have the inspectors do a better job providing coaching. So I'll skip past the VR choices here and choose from the AR choices. Do I want the phone-based or a tablet-based or a low-end headset-based or a high-end headset-based? And you'll also note that as we move to the higher end, the relative cost goes up in dollar signs from 1 to 2 or 3 or 4 dollar signs just to indicate that the cost is going up. So in this case, we might think, well, this is very important, we need a high-end headset, but it actually could be the case that you could either use a low-end headset or a high-end headset because both of those might provide the capability to have the remote coach, which is what we want, particularly because we've called out the need here to sometimes special cases occur that require the extraordinary experience level to resolve, is we will want to be able to bring in that expert to help in those cases. Okay. Next, I'm going to move into the procurement section. And this refers to the actions taken to obtain an AR or VR solution. And it really generally ends up being a decision tree that's going to guide that decision. So this might include buying an off-the-shelf solution from a vendor, or building a new solution in-house, or building a new solution with an external vendor, or some combination of these. And David, I'll turn it over to you to talk about how you think about these.
Thank you, Matt. And so, of course, we have to think about, when we think about solutions in general, how do we procure them, how do we bring them into the organization? And we looked at options. And so first off, we have to think for generic topics or content that's outside of our area of expertise at Kaiser, we would look to buy off the shelf as a potential solution. If the off-the-shelf solution doesn't exist or the content is specific or proprietary to Kaiser, we would think about developing a custom solution using our internal, and I'm going to use a new term that I learned last week, SMEs or BMEs. And when I say BMEs, I mean by business matter experts, the people that actually do the job. We are actually focused a lot more on not only people who have high level of knowledge about a topic, but people actually doing the job, and we call those BMEs, bringing them into the equation, as well as our instructional designers to build the solution internally. So that's a second option. And the third option is if we as KP are unable to develop the solution internally, then we develop a custom solution using those SMEs and BMEs, and a vendor would help us with the instructional design and building the solution. So that's how we go about procuring, or how we envision it, securing these types of applications moving forward. Some critical factors that impact us when we think about the procurement process, of course, number one is the cost. Number two is how quickly we need the solution. Number three is the capacity of our organization. Do we have the resources to actually do the work? And thirdly, do we have the content to actually fulfill the need? Do we have to actually go outside the organization? So it's cost, how quickly we need it, capacity, and then the actual learning need.
All right, next we're going to move to the technology and infrastructure section, which is where we consider how to develop, deliver, and track learning and performance support. And things we think about here include what rationale will be used to select authoring tools that will be used to develop solutions, how will graphic models be selected or developed, what types of devices will be used, and we talked before about different kinds of AR and VR devices, but we do need to determine specifically what devices. And in some cases, we may be determining it's not one device in particular, but our audiences, we might need to deliver the same solution to multiple different devices. Also, how will the learning be tracked? And can the learners do this on their own, or are they going to need assistance to be able to get started and know how to do it with the new types of equipment? So if we think about what types of tools we might use to develop augmented reality, I look at this the same way I look at determining any tool we're going to use for a learning solution, which means that the most important factors are the capability of the tool and the complexity, because we want to make sure the tools are the right level of capability for the problem we're going to solve. No good to have a tool that isn't powerful enough to do what we need to do, but also no good to have a tool that it could accomplish anything we want to accomplish, but it's too complicated for the resources that we actually have or who are able to build it. And if you look at the tools that are in the authoring column, column 2, those tools are aimed at instructional designers. An instructional designer would be able to go in and use these tools to design a learning solution. Over on the far right, Unity, Unreal, Vuforia, those things are things that we would be able to accomplish more with in terms of interactivity and what we could do, but you really need to be able to program in a language like C# to be able to use those types of tools. Now we're looking at the same chart again, but in this case we're looking at virtual reality instead of augmented reality. And you can see there's quite a number of tools capable of lower end virtual reality than instructional designers could use. And again, for the higher end, we need a scripter or a programmer. But if you look at the level 2 authoring, a lot of these tools, and maybe most well known out of this would be Captivate 2019, would give you the ability to have a virtual reality where you can look around and maybe jump to another scene and maybe click to identify some things, but not necessarily add more interactivity inside the scene than that. Now, how about that question about picking what hardware to run our solution on? So this chart shows the price ranging from $5 at the low end for a generic cardboard viewer to up to over $7,000 for a high-end AR headset. And you could start to look at this and feel like, well, augmented reality and virtual reality might necessarily be expensive, but just like there's a wide range of hardware here, there also are a wide range in the other factors that determine. So I would want you to come away not necessarily thinking AR and VR are expensive. It would probably be more accurate to say AR and VR might be inexpensive or might be expensive depending on the hardware you use and what type of equipment you pick. So if we look at this model here and I come back to that list, I could pick whatever headset I want to use or tablet I want to use. If we pick a headset that requires a computer to go with it, we need to add that on. But in this case, I'm going to choose a newer headset, which is the Oculus Quest. And it has a 64 gigabyte model and 128 gigabyte model for storage. If we choose the 64 gigabyte one, our price per headset would be $399 and no computer required. So then we want to start to think about how many people will need to be able to use this solution at once. Is it one person? Is it 10 people? Is it 50 people? So let's say that for our purposes, we want to be able to run 10 people through at a time at a lab. For 10 stations at $399, we'd be just under $4,000 in headsets. Then we want to think about the 3D modeling. And the thing that we want to think about here that's going to impact whether we have a high or low price is the modeling that we're going to do specific to our own particular equipment. Because just like there are stock photos that you can go and get to put into e-learning courses, there are stock 3D models that you can start from. So if the goal was to simulate an office, and it didn't have to be a particular office, you could probably, for $30, $40, go and buy a pack of 3D models that has every piece of furniture you could conceive of that would be in an office and place that into a scene and start to use it. But let's say that we were doing some type of equipment and that equipment is specific to us only, that's when you start to up the 3D modeling cost because a lot of modeling happening from scratch. So if we had a low-end solution, we'd be almost nothing on the 3D models if the need for graphics was generic instead of specific. Then if we look at the interactivity that goes into a solution, are we just looking at things and walking around and identifying things? Some things you could teach, like if you were trying to identify the hazards in a room, you could identify just by walking around and seeing a hazard and click to mark that hazard. But if you have real equipment in the room that needs to do things and you need to model how it works, you'd spend money on interactivity. I'm going to guess this amount, just guessing. And then the last factor can be kind of like a multiplier, and that's the breadth and scope. So let's say we were working on a solution and we just needed to do one operating room within the hospital. Then we're going to be much lower. But if we need to do the whole hospital, we're going to kind of multiply the cost around by everything else. And so those are some of the key factors that are going to impact the cost of a solution. And again, one part is that headset, but depending on what you're designing, it may be the development of the solution that could end up being more cost, or if you need people to travel to get to the solution, it could actually be the travel cost of getting to the solution that could be the cost. All right, so I'm going to pull up a second scenario here. And in scenario 2, we are looking at an assembly plant. And the workers at the assembly plant need to be aware of the safety issues they must report. In other words, spills, missing safety guards, broken items, etc. There could be a lot of different things that they might encounter that might need to be reported. Many of the things would be dangerous to demonstrate in the real plant. And we don't need to simulate fixing the issues as far as this solution is concerned. We just need to focus on identifying them. So as we did before, we're going to determine whether this is a performance support that needs augmented reality or whether this is a training solution that needs virtual reality. But because we've covered some more content, we'll also be able to think about what types of resources might be needed to develop it, and what type of visuals we're going to use for the solution, and what's the breadth or scope. So let me jump back here. And as we think about this solution, I'm going to say in this case, this is going to be best practiced by virtual reality, because we said that we don't want to practice this in the real plant because it's too dangerous to do that. We want people to do that off the job, see the things that are hazardous, know how to identify them, and then come back on the job. So that means that we need to think about, are we on a phone-based, a low-end headset-based, or a high-end headset-based virtual reality headset? And I would argue in this case, because we don't have to actually operate the equipment, we just need to walk around, find things, and identify them, that we're going to be able to do that with either a low-end headset-based solution or a phone-based solution. So if you use a phone-based solution, one of the things you're going to get is you can look around the room, but you can't really walk around the room, and you give up something that way. But conceivably possible to accomplish our learning objectives either with phone-based or low-end headset. Given how low the cost has come down on low-end headsets now, that's probably where I would go. All right, so then if we think about how are we going to develop that solution, knowing that we just need to look around and be able to identify things, then I would say that could be developed in a tool like Captivate 2019 or one of the other tools that don't really require a programmer, so we don't need to go up to the script or programmer level. We could stick with an instructional designer or what we would consider a media developer, someone without a great deal of programming skills who knows how to use the authoring tools to develop the solution. Then if we think about the graphics here, because we're really in the assembly plant, my guess is that we aren't going to be able to use stock 3D models for this. We might need to develop some custom models, or we might be able to start with some stock 3D models and modify them. So we'd end up with either $2 or $3 signs on cost there in terms of relative costs for providing the graphics for what's needed here. And then as far as the breadth or scope goes, we probably don't have enough information to say for sure on a scale of 1 to 10 where the breadth of this is. But I guess it'd probably be higher than the midpoint because they said there's lots of different things that might be encountered that need to be reported. But these are the types of things to think about when specking out a solution for how AR or VR might be able to be used. Now, one other detail to think about is this tracking. And once we've built an AR or VR solution, we usually want tracking data about the usage or how the learner progresses. And the go-to for e-learning would be the SCORM or AICC standards. But they really were built before AR and VR were in wide use, and so they're not really meant for that. They're meant for formal learning, assuming the learning will be launched from a learning management system, and mostly focused on bookmarking progress and saving the completion or score. So you probably don't want to put on a VR headset and then go and browse through your learning management system's catalog to find the course to launch. XAPI provides a better alternative. XAPI, or the Experience API, is the next generation to be able to extend beyond the SCORM standards. It's meant for both formal and informal tracking. It could track starting from anywhere. So instead of starting from the LMS, you just put on the headset. As long as we can identify it's you by how you're logged into the station, you can start that tracking, and it'll be able to connect to you without starting from the learning management system at all. We can still track bookmarking and completion and scores for virtual reality or augmented reality if we want to, but we can also track a lot more because XAPI is meant to be able to log activities of any type as you work through the scenario, just to keep a record of what people did, perhaps, if they were in that learning solution. Then moving from technology and infrastructure to assessment and evaluation, this is where we ask what types of evaluation will be conducted for the AR and VR solutions, and what methods and tools will be used to conduct the identified types of evaluation. And David, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Matt. So what's important for us is to evaluate any solution that we bring into the organization. And so we use two methodologies to evaluate the performance of our solutions. One is, of course, the Kirkpatrick 4 levels of evaluation model, and then also we use the Thalheimer's learning transfer evaluation model. So those two work in conjunction to provide us the evaluation models that we use within the organization. So when you think about the first level, which is level 0, which is usage, that data could easily be captured, as Matt talked about earlier, using XAPI to track, and that would be the number 1 area. Number 2, when you think about level 1, which is reaction, we could utilize short surveys that are housed in our learning management systems. So if you think about it for AR solutions, we could use a survey link pushed to the learners via an email once they use the solution. And if it's a VR solution, the learners would receive a survey upon completing or exiting the solution. So that's how we use it for level 1. For level 2, which is more about learning, we would use knowledge assessments that would be administered upon the completion of the solution. And so typically we would use the types of things like text-based questions, skill demonstrations. These type of assessments could be built into the solution or standalone, one or the other. For level 3, which we do several times a year, we focus on a few of our larger offerings, and we would use a sample of our learner population to observe them on the job. And so for AR solutions, we would look at learners using the solution during observations, as I mentioned before, or if it's a VR solution, we could use observations which would typically occur after the learners complete the solution, with exceptions which could be like the simulations, of course, we talked about earlier. And then the last area, which is around level 4, which is results. We also do the same thing here. We take several of our larger initiatives and we identify those through some set criteria. And so for each of the solutions, we would do a pre and a post performance data, looking at key metrics that we gather throughout the year. So those are how we would actually look at using both Thalheimer as well as the Kirkpatrick methodology to assess and evaluate the outcomes of our solutions in the AR/VR space. Matt?
All right, let's think about the organizational structure next, and this is where we look at what roles are needed to support AR and VR solutions. So as with other learning, this might include instructional designers and programmers, but now they'd be focused in AR and VR, but it might also include 3D modelers. And then again, other roles that might go across any learning solution: quality assurance testers, project managers. Maybe here, especially initially, we might need more IT support than we would need for some other solutions. If we had instructor-led VR We might need trainers, or if we have a AR with remote coach, we need coaches. And in order to make sure that we are developing learning and performance solutions that make sense, analysts and performance consultants. So really the questions that we talk about in the organizational structure section are how will you get the right people and in the right numbers into each responsible role to be able to design and develop and deliver your solution. And David, back to you.
Sure. So when you think about how we go about implementing this, so we looked at a few roles in the organization that we need to put in place to facilitate this, our strategy. And so we start typically at Kaiser looking at what we call champions. And in this particular case, we'd have to have an AR VR champion. And typically those people are, they either have a deep knowledge or expertise in a particular area, but they also are kind of super users of whatever it is we're trying to, like, either their knowledge is so great that they're really enthused by using whatever the product knowledge or solutions they're championing. So we look for those folks, number one. The second is we have a senior manager of learning and performance, and this person has a strong expertise in performance improvement practice. They also have experience with learning technologies, decision making, of course, strong management skills and communication skills. The third type of person that we need to facilitate this, and this is what we call a senior learning consultant. And these are people, again, that have expertise in specific learning and design and development areas. And then lastly, the last two are the learning consultant, which are roles within my organization that focus on adult learning theory, and also, of course, have strong consulting and communication skills. And then lastly, most importantly, always is important to have a strong project manager who can help with the management of the project and the communication of the project. So in addition to these roles, these folks also have to have a clear understanding of AR and VR strategy. So in fact, in each of these cases in my organization today, I have a person in these roles, and they are part of our larger team around our strategy. Matt?
All right, and then finally, at the top of the mountain here, after this long journey, we've reached the spot for our implementation plan, and this is all about the steps needed, the prioritization of the steps, and who's accountable for those steps. Back to you, David.
So when you think about our initial implementation plan, we actually did a few things this year to begin. So as Matt mentioned, we built the strategy, and then we went about implementing the strategy. The first opportunity we had for my organization was really to bring the concept and ideas to my leadership team. And in that process, we realized that we can not only train our leaders within the organization, but we have to actually expose the entire organization to this concept around AR and VR. And so what we did is we began planning what I call an all-hands meeting, where all of my employees come in for an annual event where we have a chance to learn about the priorities and strategies for the organization for the upcoming year, and then focus on some area of technology that's important that I at least share with the organization to begin to build awareness. The other thing we wanted to do was actually begin to improve the awareness, increase the awareness of this whole strategy among other learning organizations within Kaiser. And so we had an opportunity with ILG to present to what's called an Enterprise Learning Council. It's other learning organizations within Kaiser. We get together on a monthly basis and share what's happening in the organization at the highest level, the enterprise level, what new technology is being incorporated, who's going to be involved in testing and providing feedback, as well as what other new best practices are being applied across the organization. So we had a chance to present there as well to bring awareness to the organization. As we were thinking about planning for our all-hands meeting, we also made a decision that we would purchase KP-branded Google hardware devices for application and demonstration during my all-hands meeting. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, that we brought to the entire HPWD, my Health Plan Workforce Development team, we gave them an opportunity to actually get engaged with all of these different technologies at my all-hands meeting. Next slide, Matt. Then, in addition, some other things that we have been doing and investigating is investigating and experiencing XAPI tracking to understand how that works, the usage that I talked about earlier. We're also working with a vendor to develop a 360 video tour of some of our facilities. We're also working with a company called Immersion that's going to help us with that immersive opportunity for coaching training. And then we're also investigating Zappar and Wikitude for AR development. In fact, we've actually found a great application for that and are beginning to test it internally. And then we are in the process of setting up, we just purchased our new Oculus equipment last week, setting up a lab here in Oakland for VR opportunities.
Excellent. So I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through the third scenario here because I want to make sure we have time for questions as they come in, but I'll call your attention to the link at the top there, tinyurl.com/XR-scenarios. If you'd like to come back, that will actually bring you to the two scenarios we looked at before, and this third one, if you just want to explore that content about how you make those decisions. And at this point, I'm going to open it up to what questions you have.
Yeah, so this would be a good time to send in your questions. We got a couple here, and Matt, the first one I guess I'll send to you. And this is very equipment specific. When Google Daydream was canceled, is this because it wasn't competitive with lower-end viewers like Google Cardboard, or is it an indication that VR isn't taking off?
So that's a good question. So I did hear that news recently about Google Daydream was being canceled, but I don't think it's an indication necessarily of either of those things, about not being competitive with Google Cardboard or that VR isn't taking off. I guess my thinking is what's happening here is that Google Daydream was initially positioned as way better than sticking your phone into that cardboard device, but much, much cheaper than the other devices. And now what's happening is some of the headsets are coming out, and they don't require a connection to the computer, and the price isn't all that much, but they still provide the benefits of being able to walk in the room and be able to interact with things with a higher level of interactivity. So I guess in my mind, what caused Daydream to get canceled is that the other devices that are coming out now that are low-end devices are quite capable and hardly any more expensive than Daydream was. I think that's what's causing that.
And then another kind of follow-on question somebody has is, what happened to Google Glasses?
That's a good question. So that's a topic that has come up at the Reality 360 conference a number of times. Each year I've gone back well, Google Glasses was out there way early, and what happened to it? So I think it's safe to say that when Google Glasses first came out and was envisioned as a consumer product, it never really hit the mark for what consumers wanted it to do, and it had a challenge at the outset that it was so early on that people thought it was weird if they saw you walking around with glasses with a camera on them, which I find to be kind of interesting from the standpoint that now you see people all the time with the earbuds, microphone, phone, and when I first saw those, I thought that was quite weird. So I think it's kind of a matter of perception and what's happening with wearables, with watches and Fitbits and things like that, how long it progresses, that what was weird a while back to have on your face for these devices pretty soon as it comes out from Apple and Android, it may be considered cool to have what was considered weird before.
Yeah.
But the Google Glasses have made somewhat of a comeback for specific purposes on the enterprise side to go back and do what Google Glass was going to do, because I don't think it will ever survive as a consumer product again under that name because of the reputation they got for being weird and not fulfilling the real needs of consumers at the outset.
Great. David, this is a question for you. This is actually a question I have. So you put the strategy together, and it looks like you've done quite a bit of socialization of AR and VR in your organization. You've gone out and made an investment to set up at least a lab with some of this equipment. Are you at a point where you are moving forward with getting investment for more broader implementation? How's that going?
Yeah, so no, we're still at the very beginning stages of that. I'm very fortunate being the expert of learning in my organization that I have a great opportunity to try new technologies and bring them in to support the sales force. But so far, we're at the very beginning stages of this strategy implementation.
Great. And, here's the question. It says, we would like to get VR going here at our company, but we don't have a budget for a VR strategy. Would it make sense for us to pick a project and just do a prototype? I don't know, Matt, is that something?
So, yeah, I think whenever you look at how you're going to introduce something new, you can think about it from a grassroots, bottom up. We're going to try some things and see what sticks, or from a top down, we're going to lay out all the strategy in advance. I think with something like AR and VR, where the technology is changing so rapidly still, if you focus in on one narrow area, you may not think about as many things as you would if you touch all the areas we outlined in the table of contents in our strategy. But you have to live within the reality, right? So if you cannot get funding to do a strategy, rather than give up and say, well, we can't do a strategy, so we can't do anything at all.
Right.
If you pick a prototype to do or a proof of concept, what you want to do then is be very careful to pick one that's meaningful in your organization and reasonable to be fulfilled, and also make sure it is a good match for AR or VR. Don't pick something that's not, because any of those things could have you complete the project and immediately everybody doesn't like it. But yes, that could be an alternative.
Right, you got to be careful. It could be dead on arrival, and you don't want that. Well, okay. I think we can wrap it up here. We want to thank all of you who joined us today. Our contact information is on the screen, and we invite you to reach out to us with any questions, thoughts, or further comments. ILG is on Twitter, and we encourage you to follow us on that. We also have a LinkedIn group, Friends of Innovative Learning Group, and we encourage you to join and post discussion items there if you haven't already. And we also have a new podcast series called Let's Talk Learning. And in our latest episode, which just came out last week, David and Matt talk more about this project. So you can actually get a podcast that's probably about 10 minutes long on this particular topic. So on behalf of David and Matt and the team here at ILG, we want to thank you again for joining us on this webcast. And we want you to have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.